So I kind of feel like we've got like a little bit of a life cycle, well, not really, like that later stages of the life cycle, maybe like high school or university level parts of the life cycle. I think for some people who are listening, the idea of the Valley of Death is like something they're painfully aware of. Other people might not have heard of it before. Michael, can you give us a little definition?
Yeah, so the Valley of Death is that development period between where you have something that has been discovered, often through a university program, and the point at which you've got it in sort of phase 2 clinical trials. And there's millions and millions of dollars of research that occurs between that point and starting clinical trials. But governments don't tend to fund that research. So relying on the usual funding mechanisms is not really an option. There are some exceptions, but that's where you essentially have to take it out of the university and create a vehicle that allows you to jump over that valley of death and get it to the point where a pharmaceutical industry partner will come in and help in those latter stages of development where things get really, really expensive.
That's such a different skill set to what a researcher probably has had to have through their career to that point.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not for everyone, and I think that's something really important to note. And when you're looking at what's the best vehicle for translating research out of a university, you have to consider what is the appetite and the energy of the researchers. If they want to stay doing academic research, there's nothing wrong with that, but probably looking for a licensing arrangement early on is the best approach, where you find a company that wants to take the technology and develop it. But I actually think that the more success stories come when a researcher is willing to jump in and become an entrepreneur and try and take the program forward, because it keeps that connection. It keeps the connection with the institution where the technology was discovered and that early development went on. And it keeps someone heavily involved in the program that has deep knowledge in the technology.
It is something that sort of in my reporting I've sort of feels like I hear a lot about, a lot of discovery happening in Australia and then a lot of commercialisation happening overseas. Tim, why does this happen? What are we not getting in Australia that other places are doing?
Speaking for medical device or like AI space, I feel, for example, I went to Silicon Valley this March, and I can feel the vibes about how academics, venture capitals and industries, they really tied up very close. There is tremendous opportunity. Almost every single day you could have found the places that people talk about ideas. They're matching the technology advancement and market requirement together very well. And also they have a lot of VCs behind that, is hunting for those ideas. So this is the part when I was there, comparing to when I was here, when I'm here in Sydney, I'm sure there's a lot of places like here in Sydney, but just there's not as much strong that culture in that space. I think this is probably how I feel. I'm not sort of saying like we're competing with the Silicon Valley. Of course, that is the center of a lot of the innovations there. But we probably also, I think, we needed to identify the uniqueness in Australia and what is our strength. And we can, speaking from the AI point of view, and we can pushing our space, the position in this innovation process, yeah.
And I think things are changing though. I mean, when I started out on this journey trying to co-found Cogger Therapeutics, I got a mixture of advice. The more pessimistic was along the lines of you're committing career suicide, just focus on publishing good papers and getting NHMRC and ARC grants. Australia doesn't do research investors in Australia just focus on flipping houses and investing in mining. Well, I'm proud to say that up until our most recent financing round, which we just closed recently, every single investor in Cogger Therapeutics was an Australian investor. And we now have one US-based investor, and we brought them on not out of necessity, but out of choice, because they bring a lot of expertise to the program that's going to be really valuable to us and a lot of connections into the US market. So you absolutely can produce a startup company in Australia that remains an Australian company through critical stages of development.
Did you get that sort of pushback as well when you were looking at going into commercialisation?
I think academics by nature are quite risk averse, I would say. And I think, the whole publish, or perish sort of mentality is a difficult one to shift. But not really. I mean, I think it's actually changed a lot, I think, probably since Canoxus really first started.
I don't think I'd get that advice
No,
now.
I don't think you'd get it at all. And I think, the university has a lot of programs now, Periscope being one of them. There are many. And there are biotech incubators and things that are coming up in Australia. So I think actually the landscape is really changing in Australia. And I think that, our drug will initially go to market in Australia. And I think that I think it's changed, and I think that there's a very different appetite. I think that it's being driven from both the bottom and the top. I think there's a push in both directions, and I think universities are actually getting better at getting things out. Certainly, I've noticed a real change in our initial dealings to how it's dealt with now in university sectors, and I think that we are finally starting to change, which is a really good thing. But no, I don't think we ever really got that advice.
That's probably a good thing.